In 58 BC, Julius Caesar, under the pretext of aiding tribes allied with Rome, ordered his legions to march into Gaul. Within just a few years, he managed to conquer most of this huge country. But his success was far from complete. One after another, uprisings erupted across different parts of Gaul. Each revolt was ruthlessly crushed by his legions. When it finally seemed that Gaul had been subdued, a massive new rebellion broke out under the leadership of Vercingetorix, the chieftain of the Arverni tribe. Within weeks, the uprising spread across almost all of Gaul. The turning point came at the Battle of Gergovia. Caesar dispatched his most trusted legate, Titus Labienus, with 4 legions to the north to pacify local tribes. With his main forces, Caesar remained in central Gaul to face Vercingetorix. By that time, nearly all the Gallic peoples had joined the rebellion. Vercingetorix adopted a scorched-earth strategy. His detachments devastated the lands along Caesar's route and constantly harassed his foragers. The main stronghold of the rebels was the city of Gergovia. In June 52 BC, Caesar attempted to capture it, but the assault ended in disaster. The Romans suffered heavy losses and were forced to retreat. The victory at Gergovia convinced Vercingetorix that his strategy was working. His main advantage was cavalry. He gathered around 15,000 horsemen under his command. Fast-moving detachments of Gallic cavalry shadowed the Roman army, disrupting foraging efforts and cutting off supply routes. Vercingetorix believed the Romans would soon be forced to retreat to Italy to avoid starvation. After the setback at Gergovia, Caesar sent a messenger to Labienus, ordering him to rejoin the main army. Caesar himself marched north to meet him. Their forces reunited near the town of Agedincum, close to modern-day Paris. Realizing he could not effectively counter the highly mobile Gallic cavalry, Caesar recruited light German cavalry to strengthen his army. Meanwhile, the Allobroges, one of the major Gallic tribes living on the border between Roman territory and Gaul, joined the rebellion. They established a defensive line along the Rhone River, cutting Caesar off from supplies and reinforcements coming from Italy. They also began raiding Roman provinces. Upon hearing this, Caesar decided to march south, take a stronger position, confront Vercingetorix, and support the border provinces. Vercingetorix believed his plan succeeded, and that the Romans were finally retreating into Italy. Eager to exploit this moment, he ordered an attack on the marching Roman column using only cavalry, without infantry support. Before the assault, the Gallic horsemen swore an oath not to return home unless they had ridden through the Roman column twice. The next day, the Gallic cavalry split into 3 groups and attacked the Roman forces. The supply convoys halted, the legionaries formed defensive circles around the wagons, and Caesar's German cavalry, supported by infantry, engaged the Gauls. For a long time, the battle hung in the balance. Eventually, the German cavalry on the right flank broke one of the Gallic detachments. Seeing their flank collapse and fearing encirclement, the other 2 Gallic groups also fled. Vercingetorix had expected an easy victory, but this failure forced him to abandon offensive actions and turn to defense. He withdrew his army to the fortified city of Alesia, capital of the Mandubi tribe. There, he hoped to lure the Romans into an assault and repeat his success at Gergovia. Alesia was located on a steep hill protected by rivers on both sides. The fortress was constructed using the so-called Murus Gallicus technique. First, builders laid a row of wooden beams about half a meter apart. The gaps between the beams were filled with stones and earth. Then another row of beams was placed at a right angle to the previous one and was filled the same way. This pattern was repeated until the wall reached several meters in thickness and stood 4 to 6 meters high. A wooden palisade was usually added on top. But the defeat at Gergovia had taught Caesar a lesson. He decided not to storm Alesia. Instead, he ordered his troops to set up camp and begin siege works. Caesar commanded that Alesia be completely surrounded by a line of fortifications to block any attempts to resupply the city. Seeing this, the Gauls dispatched cavalry to attack the Roman workers. However, they were intercepted by cavalry under Titus Labienus. Noticing the clash, Caesar sent his German cavalry to assist. He also drew up his legions in battle formation in case the Gallic infantry launched a sudden attack. Before long, the Gauls could no longer withstand the German assault and began to flee. The Germans pursued them all the way to the city gates. The retreating horsemen couldn't all pass through the narrow entrance at once, and the area in front of the gate quickly became overcrowded. Seeing the enemy in flight, Caesar ordered his legions to advance. Panic broke out inside the city. Vercingetorix, fearing the Romans might break into the fortress, ordered the gates to be closed. Chaos and slaughter erupted at the entrance. Many Gallic riders dismounted and tried to climb over the palisade, desperately attempting to escape Roman and German swords. In this clash, the Gauls lost nearly all of their cavalry. Realizing he could no longer stop the Roman siege works, Vercingetorix gathered the surviving horsemen and ordered them to break through the still unfinished Roman fortifications and ride to allied Gallic tribes to call for reinforcements. Caesar learned of this plan from defectors and captured Gauls. In response, he immediately ordered the construction of a second line of fortifications, this time facing outward to defend against any relief forces coming to aid the besieged city. The Roman fortifications were built as follows. First, they dug 2 trenches, each about 4.5 meters wide and 4.5 meters deep. The earth dug from the ditches was used to build a rampart. The inner ditch was filled with water from nearby rivers. On top of the rampart, the soldiers constructed a wooden palisade about 4 meters high. Watchtowers for archers were built every 25 meters. In front of the fortifications, the legionaries dug several rows of trenches filled with sharpened stakes, as well as 8 rows of wolf pits, conical holes with sharp stakes inside to injure attackers. The inner line of fortifications stretched for 16 kilometers, while the outer line extended nearly 21 kilometers. By the time the construction was finished, famine had begun inside Alesia. At a war council, the Gauls decided to expel women, children, the elderly, and all those unable to fight from the city. Vercingetorix hoped the Romans would either enslave them or feed them, forcing them to spend their supplies. But Caesar strictly forbade anyone from passing through the Roman lines. Those expelled from Alesia were left to starve between the 2 rings of fortifications. Meanwhile, the messengers sent by Vercingetorix reached the allied tribes. The leaders of the Gallic tribes gathered their militias and marched to relieve the besieged city of Alesia. According to Caesar, the relief force numbered around 250,000 infantry and 8,000 cavalry. Modern estimates are far lower, but even so, the Gauls still significantly outnumbered the Romans. The relief army set up camp on a hill roughly a mile from the Roman fortifications. Soon after, Gallic cavalry, supported by archers and light infantry, advanced onto the plains between their camp and the Roman lines. Caesar sent his German cavalry to confront them, and a fierce battle began. The Gauls inside Alesia saw that reinforcements had arrived, and morale among the defenders soared. Vercingetorix led his troops out of the city, formed them up in front of the Roman defenses, and prepared to attempt a breakout if the battle outside went in their favor. Despite a relentless hail of arrows, the German cavalry managed to regroup, take up a stronger position, and rout the Gallic horsemen. The Gallic riders broke and fled back to their camp, leaving their archers, who had advanced too far, exposed. Seeing their allies defeated, the Gauls withdrew back into the fortress. The next day was spent preparing for a full assault on the Roman outer fortifications. By nightfall, the Gauls launched a massive attack. In this sector, Roman defenses were commanded by Marcus Antonius and Gaius Trebonius. They organized reinforcements to support the most threatened positions. Seeing their allies attack, Vercingetorix ordered his own forces to strike the same section of the Roman lines. However, his advance was delayed by the narrow passageways and the crowds of his troops. By the time Vercingetorix's forces reached the Roman fortifications, Antonius and Trebonius had already repelled the assault from the outside. Realizing the combined attack had failed, the Gauls withdrew behind the walls of Alesia. The next day, the Gauls regrouped and launched a coordinated assault along the entire perimeter of the Roman outer defenses. Their main force attacked from the northeast, where a large hill gave them the advantage of the higher ground. As the battle began, Vercingetorix also led his troops out of Alesia and attacked the inner Roman lines. Everyone understood that this was the final decisive moment. The Romans had nowhere left to retreat. Superior Gallic forces were pressing in from all sides. If the Gauls managed to break through the Roman palisade, the entire defense would collapse. But the Gauls were also desperate. Food supplies in Alesia had run out days earlier, and their only options were to break through or face slavery or starvation. The situation was critical. Caesar moved 40 additional cohorts to the northeastern sector. He personally stood among the soldiers, encouraging and rallying them. Titus Labienus was in command of the defenses in this area. When it became clear that the Gauls were close to breaking through, Labienus devised a bold plan: a counterattack using 4 cohorts of infantry and all remaining cavalry. When Caesar heard of this, he personally led the cavalry charge. His detachment rode around and climbed the hill behind the attacking Gauls. From the high ground, they struck the enemy from the rear. The Gauls suddenly found themselves caught between 2 forces. The Romans on the palisade saw what was happening. Inspired, they doubled their effort against the attackers. The Gauls, by contrast, panicked. Their formations collapsed, and they began to flee. Few escaped death that day. Seeing their best forces defeated, the Gallic relief army abandoned the siege and retreated. The Romans shifted their efforts to the inner fortifications and quickly drove the remaining Gauls back behind the walls of Alesia. The victory was absolute. Alesia surrendered the next day. The Romans captured around 40,000 Gallic warriors, all of whom Caesar enslaved except for the Aedui and Arverni. By sparing them, he hoped to secure the loyalty of the largest tribes in Gaul. Caesar brought Vercingetorix to Rome. The Gallic leader spent 5 years imprisoned, awaiting Caesar's triumph. During the procession, he was dressed in his armor, placed in a cage, and paraded through the streets of Rome. After the triumph, Vercingetorix was strangled. Caesar himself would not live much longer, less than a year after Vercingetorix's death. He too was killed, struck down by the daggers of conspirators. But that is a story for another video. If you made it to the end of this video, we really appreciate it if you liked and subscribed. Follow along on our journey through ancient civilizations and history. We put out new episodes every single week. If you'd like to support the channel, join our Patreon or become a YouTube channel member. You get early access to new episodes, behind-the-scenes looks, and more. You can also leave a super thanks below to give us a little extra boost. If you want to listen to history on the go, check out our all-new podcast, Parabellum History. You can find it on all major podcast platforms. Thanks again for tuning in, and we hope to see you next time.